I've seen so many first-time CNC buyers get burned by the budget machines that look good on a picture but turn into a headache the minute they try to cut real material. You end up with a noisy, wobbling frame, missed steps, and a lot of wasted wood or acrylic that could have been a finished product instead of a pile of scrap. That regret is why I spent a few days actually assembling the Genmitsu PROVerXL 4030 V2, running a couple of test projects, and scrolling through forums to see if the hype matches the reality. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the PROVerXL isn't just a cheaper version of a high-end industrial router. It sits in that sweet spot where a serious hobbyist or a fledgling small business can finally afford a machine that doesn't feel like a toy, but also doesn't require a dedicated workshop with reinforced concrete floors. The biggest hesitation most people have is whether the stepper motor upgrades and the new motion system actually translate into smoother cuts and less tinkering. In my experience, they do, though not without a few caveats. The box arrives with the frame already bolted together, which is a nice time saver. You still need to tighten a handful of screws, attach the axis motor, and mount the spindle, but the whole thing takes about an hour if you have a decent set of tools. What surprised me was how intuitive the wiring layout is. The cables are color-coded, the power supply plugs right into the control box, and the USB connection to your laptop feels like you're plugging in any other peripheral. The easy-to-use claim isn't just marketing fluff. The included software walks you through setting the work area, zeroing the axes, and running a simple code file without demanding you rewrite any code. Now, let's talk about the real work cutting. I started with 3mm Baltic birch plywood, a material most beginner CNC users love because it's forgiving and cheap. The first pass at a 50mm square pocket took about half the time the older version of this machine needed, thanks to the upgraded motion system that seems to have reduced backlash noticeably. The router held its position well, and the pocket came out with clean walls and a smooth bottom. When I moved on to 2mm acrylic, the same settings produced a crisp edge without the crazing that cheaper machines often cause when the spindle slows down at corners. One of the practical strengths that becomes evident in a small business setting is the ability to switch between material types without a major recalibration. Because the PROVerXL's frame is rigid enough to handle aluminum up to about 2mm thick, you can run a batch of metal signs one day and a batch of wooden coasters the next, simply swapping the workpiece and adjusting the spindle speed. That flexibility is where the wide range of materials claim turns into real cash flow potential. You're not locked into a single niche. However, there are trade-offs you need to be aware of before you click buy. The machine's work envelope is 403mm by 300mm by 110mm, which is generous for most personal projects but can feel cramped if you're planning to produce larger signage or furniture components. In a small workshop, that size is usually fine, but it does mean you'll have to plan your nesting strategy carefully to avoid wasting material. Another point is the spindle power. The stock 800W spindle is adequate for wood, plastics, and thin aluminum, but if you ever need to cut hardwoods thicker than 10mm or dense composites, you'll find the spindle struggling to maintain speed, and you'll have to lower feed rates, which can slow production considerably. Noise is another hidden factor. The closed-loop stepper motors run quieter than open-loop equivalents, but they're not silent. In my apartment-style studio, the machine sits at a noticeable 68 dB when carving a dense piece of plywood. It's not unbearable, but if you share the space with a home office or a bedroom, you'll want to budget for some ear protection or a sound-dampening enclosure. So who should walk away from this review? If you're a hobbyist who only ever makes one-off keychains or tiny decorative pieces, you might be better off with a smaller, less expensive desktop router that takes up even less floor space. Likewise, if your production runs involve thick hardwoods, large sheets of MDF, or heavy metal, you'll quickly outgrow the PROVerXL's capacity and power. In those cases, spending a bit more on a larger CNC or a CNC with a higher torque spindle makes more sense. On the other hand, the sweet spot for the PROVerXL is exactly the audience it markets to: small business owners who need a reliable, reasonably fast machine to churn out medium-sized parts on a regular basis. Think custom wooden phone stands, laser-etched acrylic nameplates, or short runs of aluminum key tags. The faster motion system reduces cycle times enough that you can meet modest order deadlines without staying up all night tweaking settings. The ease of setup means you won't have to spend weeks just getting the machine to run, and the ability to